This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The African Union and the World Bank suspend Sudan as pressure mounts on the military following Monday's coup. What does the standoff between ECOWAS and Bamako mean for Mali's transition? And the art of knitting making a comeback in Uganda. We'll tell you more. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa's power utility and its suppliers oil the wheels of a cleaner and greener South Africa. And Tunisia introduces a vaccine pass for access to public and private facilities. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Great to have you along with me for this hour. Let's begin in Sudan, where pressure continues to mount on Sudan's military following its move to take control of the government. The African Union says it's suspending Khartoum's participation in all of the bloc's activities until the civilian-led transitional government is restored. Meanwhile, the World Bank Group President David Malpass has confirmed that the financial institution has paused disbursements in all of its operations in Sudan. The International Monetary Fund said it was following developments closely after the Prime Minister was detained and donors pulled out aid. The U.S. announced that it has cut $700 million in aid to Sudan hours after the military arrested civilian officials. The United Nations, European Union, and Arab League have expressed concern over the events in Sudan and called for all parties to exercise restraint. Now, anti-military demonstrations have entered a third day. State oil company workers and doctors say they will also be joining protests. CGTN's Naba Mohideen has more from Khartoum.
More protests are erupting in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, and other Sudanese states. They are condemning the military takeover. The military generals are trying to get life back to normal by opening the bridges, allowing the movement of people and goods, and removing the barricades. But the protesters said they will keep the barricades until the power is restored to the civilian rulers. Also, there is some efforts by UNICAMS, which is the UN mission in Sudan, to assist transition in Sudan, to convince the military generals to be in talks with the civilian leaders so they can help in restoring the pact, the power sharing pact. The meeting was just this afternoon. Regarding the security situation, it is still unclear. People feel the security situation is foggy, and people said they will be in a home sitting. They will not move from their neighborhoods. They will just put the barricades and stay in homes, striking and stopping all of the businesses, like schools, universities, banks, gas stations. Everything is closed now. The Prime Minister didn't issue any direct comments since he was released. There is some news that he is in his house under heavy or high security. And the military officials, they didn't say anything after the latest news. They just said life should get back to normal. They made some decisions like reopening of the airport. The access to the airport is blocked by the barricades and by the heavy vehicles of the military around the airport. So right now, the travelers, they can't leave their residence to go to the airport. In the same time, workers of the airports right now are striking, and they said they will not go back to work, and they are joining the protesters, and they are joining the comprehensive civil disobedience, which will be in the upcoming days.
Let's now cross to Addis Ababa, where CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi is standing by. Coletta, welcome to Africa Live. The African Union has suspended Sudan from all its activities. Can you give us more details, Coletta?
Yes, this comes after the African Union Peace and Security Council met as of yesterday night, and we had the communique coming out today. And it's kind of the African Union asserting itself a strong voice supporting the civilians in Sudan by telling the military that it will not tolerate its representation within the African Union if the leadership in Sudan is under the military. And this is according to the constitutional requirements of the African Union, a requirement that even the Sudan has accepted to it when they were signing it up. So we are seeing the African Union kind of frustrated also, because I was speaking to one of the think tanks, Amani Africa, that was saying that the whole Juba-supported process had integrated some of the armed groups from, for example, Blue Nile, South Kordofan, and Darfur, and they were part of the transitional process. So dissolving that by the military happening now, then it really brings down the whole process of bringing peace to Sudan. So the AU is asserting itself that it will not support the military.
The African Union certainly clamping down on the military there. The Pan-African body says the sanctions will be in place until the restoration of the civilian-led transitional authority. Do we know of any other effort by the AU to help restore stability in Khartoum, Coletta?
Yes, we're bound to see a lot of maybe shuttle diplomacy and a lot of movement here by the African Union and different parties related to it. The AU Peace and Security Council says it will send a mission to Sudan to try and speak to the stakeholders to see if they can come back to the transitional process. It has also asked the chairperson of the African Union Commission to intensify his engagement with both stakeholders to ensure that he convinces them on the value of the transitional process, and has also asked the AU Commission to send his emissary. Let's remember that just recently the AU Commission appointed the former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, as the special envoy for the Horn of Africa. His focus was more on Ethiopia, but now he might have to take something else on his plate, and that is Sudan.
Coletta, thank you for keeping a close eye on that story. We certainly appreciate your insights. Much appreciated. Right now, joining me now is Dr. Jihad Mashamoon, a researcher and political analyst focusing on civil-military relations in Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. He joins us from Exeter in the UK. Doctor, welcome to Africa Live. The World Bank has also suspended aid to Sudan. So has the United States. What are the implications of the increasing international isolation of Sudan, especially now that the country is in a crisis?
Thank you, Richard. It's good to be here. Regarding the implications, I think the military has been foreseeing this behavior, because now from my reading of the situation, the military is looking to recruit a prime minister who has been part of international organizations. So to create another image of a Hamdouk appeal, to remove sanctions against Sudan, and to improve the image of the military to the international community. Now, I would suggest that the international community can focus on helping to transition to achieving targeted sanctions on the military and their supporters of the former regime, because those two factions decided to take power on their own. Regarding further implications, is that it does provide a signal that the international community cares about Sudan and would like to help in the transition period, but it could be firmer. You could be firm with the behavior to how to deal with the military, as I stated earlier.
All right, Dr. Jihad Mashamoon, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight as well. We appreciate it. Dr. Jihad Mashamoon, a researcher and political analyst, speaking to us. Moving on, a threatening letter that forced an Egypt airplane bound for Moscow to return to Cairo was a hoax. And this is according to officials investigating the document that was left on board flight MS-728. They, however, did not disclose the content of the message. The aircraft was forced back to the Egyptian capital only 22 minutes after taking off on Wednesday, and another plane took off in its place with 93 passengers. Well, flights between Moscow and Cairo resumed in April 2018 after being suspended for 2.5 years following a terrorist attack. Well, today is the deadline given for a special representative of the West African bloc, ECOWAS, to leave Mali. Mali's transitional government ordered the envoy on Monday to leave the country within 72 hours. Foreign Affairs Minister Abdoulaye Diop accused Hamidou Boli of engaging with groups, including politicians and journalists, who undertake activities hostile to the transition. Nevertheless, Diop said Mali remains committed to maintaining good relations with ECOWAS. The bloc has been pressing Mali to respect its commitment to hold presidential and legislative elections next February following an August 2020 military coup. The interim authorities this week have said they will confirm a date for elections by December. Let's bring in Tulu Akerele, a CEO of TAS Security Solutions. She joins us from London. Tulu, thank you for taking time to speak to us here on Africa Live. So what does the standoff between ECOWAS and Bamako mean for Mali's transition? Tulu?
Well, thank you for having me on tonight. Although I don't represent ECOWAS personally, my avid interest in West African political development means that I can recognize ECOWAS as a supreme governing body. And if there is a standoff, it's most likely because Mali is jeopardizing the principles and values of what ECOWAS represents, which is, of course, cohesion and collective development, and to elevate the status of West African countries. So ECOWAS has now by default put itself in the opposition camp, so to speak. And we can see that in the most recent expulsion of Hamidou Boli from Mali. He was at the forefront of ECOWAS's drive to implement the restoration of democracy. So naturally, he was a target. So I would say the transition is most definitely on hold. There are a matrix of factors that suggest that there will not be a transition to democracy in February. Nothing has been done to prepare. We haven't seen electoral lists being revised, delegation of territories, political activities, campaigning, voter registration. Now, none of these things can be done quickly, much less with the war-torn nature of the country. So I do believe ECOWAS will tighten the belt, and I do not think we will see any transition in February.
Well, speaking of tightening the belt, there is increasing defiance of ECOWAS by some of its member states like Mali and Guinea. Is the West African body running out of options on how to deal with some of its member states who appear to be undermining its principles and mandates?
Great question. Thank you. I mean, we've seen sudden changes in the regime. Like you mentioned, the coup in Guinea, that's just Mali's neighbors. So we're seeing currently 2 out of 15 member states of ECOWAS are defaulting. Now, ECOWAS has to be loyal to the institution and its values and strengthen the states rather than blindly following the leaders. So we've seen sanctions have been given to the leaders of these countries. But it is important to remember that over 50% of Mali's budget is financed through donor assistance. So we've seen France has been unhappy with the invitation of Russia into the mix. They were seen as an enemy of the state, France, and paid the price for essentially standing up for the ECOWAS values. Now, if we go back to 2012, Nigeria was actually one of the first countries to denounce the coup back then and the unconstitutional manner of the transition. But Nigeria has its own issues, insecurity problems, and as a West African giant can't really participate in Mali's affairs, which creates a larger problem for sub-Saharan Africa. And we're seeing a lack of willingness on the part of the regime in Mali to move forwards towards the restoration of democracy. So I do think it's a tricky situation for ECOWAS because they're not going to use force. They will take the moral high ground because of the humanitarian aid that is extended. Mali is landlocked, so there's no point really punishing the citizens. We may see something like government-to-government contacts being limited. We may see a scaled back approach from diplomatic representation from ECOWAS to Mali. But I think until we see this active movement towards democracy in Mali, we're going to continue to see a knock-on effect throughout the continent, and we're going to see as a result an increase in poverty and most likely deprivation. So I think it's going to be very difficult for Mali, especially when they're faced with soldiers or insurgents or weapons. But I don't think they will take a forceful approach. They will just scale back diplomatically and try to manage the situation that way and through sanctions.
And let's leave it there for now. Tulu Akerele, thank you for sharing your perspective. Much appreciated as well. You are watching Africa Live. The news continues with a lot more coming your way after the break. Here's what's ahead. China releases white paper on addressing climate issues. And Gabon's mangroves could fight climate change but are under threat.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate your company. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced lifting the state of emergency throughout Egypt, including the restive North Sinai. The move reflects the government's confidence in the level of security achieved after years of combating terrorism. Politicians and rights activists welcomed the move, which they say could increase confidence in the Egyptian legal system and attract more foreigners to invest and visit Egypt. Here is Adel El-Mahroui with more.
After 18 decrees of extending the state of emergency over 5 years, the Egyptian president surprised the nation by cancelling it this week. In a post on social media, Sisi says, quote, Egypt has become an oasis of security and stability in the region. Hence, it was decided for the first time in years to cancel the extension of the state of emergency in all areas of the country.
This must be the hardest decision the Egyptian president had to take in 2021. It's a decision that brings back democracy to Egypt by cancelling all exceptional legal measures that used to be practiced. The state of law was issued for two reasons: fighting domestic terrorism and narcotics trading. The decision is a declaration of victory in both.
With the cancellation of the state of emergency, many freedoms should be restored. Legally, police and military officers no longer have the right to arrest or search private properties without judicial warrants. The list includes lifting censorship over all mass media, restrictions for people to gather and mobilize, and cancelling exceptional judicial bodies like the Supreme National Security Court.
The National Security Court will resume investigating all cases it began. However, any pending cases will go back to regular courts. There is no doubt that lifting the state of emergency will have a positive impact on the economy, on tourism, and political life. This could be an opportunity to bring confidence in Egypt's legal system and security, which will attract foreigners to visit and invest.
In the same year President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi took the presidential office in 2014, he declared a state of emergency in North Sinai, where the nation has been fighting militant insurgency. After two terrorist bomb attacks in 2017 targeted two churches, killing and injuring dozens, Sisi expanded the emergency state to include the entire nation. Since the establishment of the Arab Republic of Egypt in 1952, Egyptians have been living under martial law or a state of emergency. It was lifted for a very little time during these 7 decades. So to people here, the state of emergency is the norm. And while lifting it has been widely welcomed, some are wondering for how long will that last. Adel El-Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
More women have reported alleged sexual exploitation and abuse by aid workers in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and that's according to the World Health Organization. The reports are part of a widening 2018-2020 scandal. An independent commission last month confirmed that some 83 aid workers, a quarter of them employed by the WHO, were involved in sexual coercion and abuse during the country's 10th Ebola outbreak. Its report cites 9 rape allegations, including that of a 14-year-old girl accusing a WHO driver. She later gave birth to his child. Dr. Gaia Gamahagawe, the WHO's acting director of prevention and response to sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment, said the WHO was referring rape cases to national authorities for probes. The names of alleged perpetrators are also being uploaded in the UN ClearCheck database as a system-wide tool that screens potential employees.
So we have heard through the interagency network that there are more complaints in Goma, but we expect more complaints everywhere because of the awareness raising that we're doing. I believe there was total underreporting across the world, as was the case in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But it's also important to note that we will hand over all 83 case files to the UN investigation services because there could be alleged perpetrators that work for other UN agencies. So that is in process. We're discussing that, to hand all of the case files over to the UN investigation services.
Chinese Premier has called for a more inclusive, tolerant, and sustainable East Asia. Li Keqiang was speaking at the 24th ASEAN +3 Summit via video link. He called for better public health governance, deepening of regional economic integration, and strengthening of industrial cooperation among East Asian countries. The Chinese Premier also called for promotion of digital economy and green sustainable growth. The ASEAN +3 consists of 10 ASEAN member states, as well as China, Japan, and South Korea. China has issued a white paper on its progress and future plans on green development. Officials say the country has taken a series of measures to adjust its industrial structure and increase energy efficiency. They say China's carbon intensity has decreased significantly.
Greenhouse gas emissions have been effectively put under control. In 2020, China's carbon emission intensity reduced by 18.8% compared to 2015 and 48.4% lower than 2005, exceeding the 40 to 45 promised to the international community and basically reversing the rapid growth of CO2 emissions. The optimization of the energy structure has achieved results. In 2020, China's non-fossil fuel energy accounted for 15.9% of energy consumption, an increase of 8.5 percentage points from 2005. Reliance on coal consumption has dropped significantly, and energy structure optimization has achieved significant results.
Yemen was introducing China's climate white paper during a press conference in Beijing. The vice minister said China has accelerated the transformation to a clean and low carbon energy consumption structure, and the new energy industry is witnessing strong growth. He said China will stick to multilateralism and remain committed to building a global climate governance system that is fair, rational, and beneficial to all. And to Gabon, where environmentalists are urging communities there to do more to protect the country's forests. Gabon has the world's tallest mangroves with potential to trap greenhouse gases responsible for climate change. Here is CGTN's Wanja Mungai with the story.
The mangrove trees in Gabon are unique. They are considered a national treasure by environmental enthusiasts and conservationists. Mangroves are known for absorption of carbons, which cause climate change.
We are hoping that with time, people will understand more and more the importance of mangroves, because I always say if we destroy all those mangroves, water will replace them. And if we want to build, we will build on water. We are going to end up in water. If we want to practice agriculture, everything will be drowned. So it would be more important to maintain the mangroves. If we destroy it now, what will we eat? Because that's where the fish reproduce. What will we eat?
De maintenir les mangroves. A 2018 study by journal Nature Geoscience showed that Gabon's mangroves stand among the world's tallest.
The mangrove ecosystem, we have really to be careful about them, not to destroy them, because if you destroy mangrove ecosystem, then we will emit a lot of carbon from the atmosphere.
Although they have the potential to cut carbon emissions responsible for climate change, not many locals know of their value.
We are more afraid for them because, as you can see, they're in a basin of sorts, and when the heavy rains come, the water can rise.
The United Nations recommends that member states reduce carbon emissions to pre-industrial levels. Gabon may have found one solution to cutting greenhouse gas emissions: planting more mangroves and protecting existing ones. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Time now for our business segment, and it's over to you, Uche.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa's power utility and its suppliers oil the wheels of a cleaner and greener South Africa. And Tunisia introduces a vaccine pass for access to public and private facilities.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa. The country's power utility Eskom and its two largest coal suppliers, Exxaro and Seriti Resources, have now signed a memorandum of understanding. This spells out their intentions to develop renewable energy projects in order to lower the carbon footprint at their operations. Here's Angelo Coppola with more on that story.
Exxaro recently announced their new strategy to move from a pure coal producer to a company also developing and generating renewable energy.
The first way we've gone about that is to develop renewable energy solutions for our own mines and try to ensure and enable us to decarbonize as quickly as possible, but also consequently reducing the cost of energy and thereby increasing our profit margins on our existing mines.
The company then started talking to other mines, including Seriti Holdings, and finally approached Eskom as the key electricity generator in the country.
The two largest coal suppliers are going to work with Eskom to decarbonize that supply chain through the introduction of renewable energy solutions, either at the mines themselves or on off-site locations, potentially even on Eskom land.
Seriti also plans to create a business unit to focus on finding the opportunities to use renewable energy for its operations.
If we were to identify an opportunity where we can generate electricity to run our conveyor belts, generate electricity to run some of our big machines, generate electricity to run parts of our business, that will contribute towards reducing our carbon emissions and ESCOM as well going forward and the country. Effectively, we are not stopping to mine coal. We'll continue to mine coal, but mining coal responsibly.
Sureti and Exaro are looking at producing between 100 and 200 megawatts of renewable energy at a cost of around $1 million per installed renewable energy capacity. The planning hasn't started yet.
We've done that calculation. It's not been agreed who's exactly going to do what yet. Sureti might develop some of its own solutions. We propose solutions to them, but they might develop some of its own. We will obviously develop for ourselves, but we'll be working together to get the best solution for all the mines, and that still needs a little bit of work.
Sureti is also committed to action and has started the planning process with internal discussions, life of mine plans, and will finalize budgets in December.
But in January, we want to make sure that we hit it hard in identifying specific projects by mine and ensuring that then we take something to the board, which the board shall have has already signed off, but the board will sign off on the specific projects per mine.
The signing of the MOU is a momentous occasion, given that the two mines constitute 80% of the supply of coal to ESCOM. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And let's head to Egypt now, where sessions at the Cairo Water Week conference are shining a light on how the North African nation is battling with the impacts of climate change in its coastal areas. Now, according to the discussions, if action is not taken urgently, some resort cities and industrial areas could be displaced by water within a decade. Here's Yasser Hakim with more.
It's an urgent situation. The heavily populated cities on the River Nile and on the Mediterranean Sea, including Alexandria, are threatened by the effects of climate change and global warming.
The state realized the huge dangers it faces from this issue after the beachline was eroded by more than 4.5 kilometers east of Rashid City and 2.6 kilometers of the Eastern Nile Path in Damietta City. This threatens investments on the coastline, weather, agricultural land, industrial projects, and coastal resort cities that could perish from the map.
In 2018, the North African country launched a project to enhance the country's resilience and adaptation to environmental changes. The project, in partnership with the Green Climate Fund and the UNDP, aims at protecting the Delta region and the northern coast from the impacts of climate change. The director of the project says it will initially cost more than $100 million.
The project deals with the sea level rise impacts in the Nile Delta. So we are building dunes to stop the water from flooding the land and to protect people and their infrastructure. And in the long term, we are also developing an integrated coastal zone management plan that will manage the development in the north coast of Egypt, and it will ensure sustainability of the development and also will protect the investments.
Knowing these efforts are not enough, the government has included the Shore Protection Authority to help prevent beach erosions in 5 of the coastal governorates at a cost of $310 million.
First, we are working on protecting the 69 kilometers on the East Delta coastline, which is the most vulnerable to climate change. In the best case scenario, this area will totally go underwater from flooding. We have finished securing 45 kilometers from the 69 kilometers. The second phase is doing the studies for all the northern coastlines on the Mediterranean Sea to define the environmental changes taking place, solutions for these issues, and how to reaccommodate people and investments in the area.
According to the government, if these issues are not dealt with within the next 10 years, then more than 5 million people from the Nile Delta region will be displaced. Also, Egypt's main crops and arable land will decrease by 19%, damaging the economy and putting 4 million people out of work. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Tunisia is now mandating COVID-19 vaccine passes for Tunisians and foreign travelers. A presidential decree issued on Friday said officials, employees and visitors are now required to show a card providing inoculation against the coronavirus. It is required to access public and private facilities in the country. Here's Adnan Shaushi with the details.
The president of the COVID-19 vaccination campaign and head of Pasteur Institute in Tunis explained that vaccine pass will also be required to enter malls, cafes, restaurants, bars, hotels and tourist resorts.
The vaccine is not compulsory. It's still free and not mandatory. People have misunderstood the decree. Yes, many citizens are vaccinated. They can resume a normal life and go anywhere, just like vaccinated tourists. However, the state will not impose the vaccine on those who refuse it, but they will not be allowed to enter any closed private or public facility without the pass. People have to take responsibility for their choices.
Hashmi Luzir added that there are some people who can't get a COVID-19 vaccine for medical reasons.
There are some exceptions and very rare cases of patients who suffer from diseases or allergies and could show side effects after vaccination. They are treated separately. They will be given the pass even without a COVID-19 vaccination. This is a very small portion of the population.
According to the scientific committee at the health department, Tunisia is split on vaccine passes.
I completed my vaccination, but I don't think it should be made mandatory. People have the right to refuse it, but their freedom of movement will be restricted.
I am diabetic. I'm forced to get vaccinated in order to travel abroad and live a normal life, but I'm not convinced about the safety and efficiency of vaccines. The authorities are pushing for more restrictions and imposing the vaccine pass in an indirect way.
The COVID-19 task force has announced that 37 patients are currently on life support in public and private hospitals, and 116 are in intensive care. Tunisia has recorded more than 25,100 deaths since the outbreak of the pandemic in the North African country in March 2020. Many Tunisians believe that the ease or freedom to work and engage in leisure activities will be limited by the health pass. The health department plans to launch a COVID-19 awareness campaign and to step up the vaccination operation in the next few days. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And in some international news, China is now widening its efforts to build homegrown hidden champions, which are basically small and medium-sized enterprises that dominate major markets in niche sectors. Now, since 2018, the country has announced 3 lists of the innovative SMEs, totaling 4,900 companies, which it calls little giants. And quite a few of them are in Shanghai, as Ying Yunyi has been finding out.
The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology says that to make the list of little giants, an SME must command a high market share, have significant innovation capacity, and control a core technology. It hopes to see around 10,000 such enterprises emerge in the next 3 to 5 years. Shanghai-based Taimi Robotics is one. Established in 2015, the company mainly targets high-end medical service robots, with its disinfection robots already in use in many hospitals in the country. Executive says demand for the robots was on the increase even before the COVID-19 pandemic.
Our disinfection robots are widely used now as the pandemic has picked up the demand. But we had already been working on medical service robots for a long time before the pandemic. Medical service robots have a lot of applications, such as preventing cross-infection in the ICU, but it's still a niche industry, and we hope we can produce more innovations and boost the industry's development.
So far, Taimi Robotics has raised 4 rounds of finance, based not only on its disinfection robots, but also on other medical needs that the little machine can help meet. Increasing demand is one thing, but Pan says the government has also been offering assistance to advanced small companies like his. Being recognized as Little Giant is a big step up the ladder.
Authorities officially recognize your company as Little Giant Company, which will help you with your financing. Investors will think your company has the potential to grow in your specialty, and customers will also have more confidence in your products, as it's a recognition from the government, not just a third-party institution. That will boost the development of the company.
MIIT data show most of these companies are in the fields of high-end equipment manufacturing, new materials, and medicines. There are 262 little giants in Shanghai, and industry analysts say that gathering in cities like Shanghai will create further opportunities for the new firms.
小巨人企业往往具有一些特性
The little giant companies have to invest a lot in R&D, and they have a great demand for professionals. Cities like Shanghai with a strong economic base are likely to attract the professionals and investors, and that's why you see a lot of little giant companies in cities like this.
小巨人企业快速发展的这个主要原因。
As of the end of August, more than 300 little giant companies were listed on Asia Exchange, with a total market value of over 2.96 trillion yuan. They are also expected to get a lot of support from the new Beijing Stock Exchange, which was inaugurated last month, focusing on innovative companies. The hope is, of course, that the little giants will continue to grow up and play even bigger roles in their industries. 殷志怡 ICS for CGTN Shanghai.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business Africa. We'll continue to bring you the latest updates out of Sudan. That's after the AU suspended the country from the union's activities. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Thank you so much, Uche. The news continues on Africa Live. Do not go away. Here's what's ahead. The old art of knitting is making a comeback in Uganda. We will tell you more.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
China's coastal industrial centers see new potential, with manufacturing flourishing by the sea. From protecting the ocean environment to boosting the marine economy, new innovations seek sustainable development. Along the coast of the Yellow Sea and the Bohai Sea, CGTN presents Tides of Change Part 3, our ultimate trip to discover a promising future.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Crocheting is one of the latest trends in Uganda, the centuries-old tradition named for the French verb crochet, meaning to hook, is providing clothing for fashionable Ugandans and an income for designers practicing the craft. Leonce Yenge brings us more details.
Crocheting is a traditional craft that has stayed with Gloria Lakwonyero for years. It's a way to create textiles using a crochet hook to interlock loops of yarn, thread, or strands of other materials. She grew up watching her mother make beautiful tablecloth and placemats.
All the kids, all of us basically learned how to do crochet from her. It was so interesting.
That was close to 3 decades ago. Now the crochet hook is central to Lakwonyero's business. She says the market for crocheted clothing is growing.
Many people like fashion, so crochet being one of those skills that you can manipulate to create different things. Yeah, I think that's the reason why it has kind of picked up, really.
Lakwonyero sells her pieces online and through orders. Animated characters are popular with children, other designs more appealing to adults. And to get a fine piece, patience is key. Lakwonyero says it takes her a few hours, sometimes days, to crochet a product, and there's quite a number of items. The bags, babies' shoes, and dresses too. She says the shawls are her clients' favorites. Elizabeth Nyaga is here to pick up her order. She says the crocheted shawls are an inexpensive choice for something to keep her warm. But she says she's tempted by lots of other crocheted pieces on offer.
I recently got the fanny pack. It is super practical. Like when you don't have to carry too much, you just have a small bag. You can put your phone, you can put your purse in it, and then you can either just tie it around your waist or sling it on your shoulders. it's lovely. I just love it.
For some, crocheting is simply a way to relax. For others, another way to make some money. Either way, this old-fashioned practice is threading its way back.
Us being locked at home for a very long time sort of led to the rise of this trend, because so many people decided to take on the craft, decided to try and experiment and see, can I do this, am I good at this, and I think that's the whole essence of trying out new things.
Trying out new things, or in this case, polishing a skill first learned years ago, and revitalizing a craft that's centuries old to clothe people of all ages. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Bao, or board in Swahili, is a traditional board game commonly played in Eastern African countries like Tanzania, Kenya, and the Comores. Bao is a two-player turn-based strategy game. Its complexity and strategic depth has raised interest in scholars of several disciplines, including game theory, complexity theory, and psychology. CGTN's Isaac Lukando finds out more about the game.
Bao, a chess-like board game, has been at the center of Swahili culture for centuries. Mainly played by Tanzania's coastal communities, 115 of Tanzania's 120 tribes are said to play some form of this game. Monday Likwepa, chairman of the Tanzania Bao Association, argues variations of the game are also played across Africa.
In Nigeria, they call this game Amandala. In Ghana, they call it Amankwa. Go to Rwanda, the game is called Ingesolo. And if you go to Kenya, it's called Ajua. This means that the game is African, but we're not sure how and when exactly it started.
The game is played by two people on either side of a 32-hole board divided into 4 rows. Armed with 32 seeds each, a player seeks to leave his opponent without seeds in his inner row through a series of moves, rendering the opponent immobile.
A Bao player thinks deeply, thinking about the day before yesterday, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. By this, I mean that the game has patterns. With proper administration, it can help mold many professionals in the nation.
Tanzania's founding father, Julius Nyerere, an avid player of the game, had ambitions to spread it to China and the rest of the world. As proof, Likwepa claims he possesses the only photograph in existence of Tanzania's founding father explaining the rules of the game to his then Chinese counterpart, Mao Zedong.
Bao has been passed on from generation to generation here in East Africa. Players argue the popular board game serves to improve their strategy setting and problem-solving skills.
The complexity and depth of strategy involved in playing Bao have over the years caught the attention of various scholars. Players in Tanzania say the game has numerous benefits.
What attracts you to the game is the trash talk. While said in jest, the words are part of the game's strategy.
Those that dodge math in class and come to play Bao find the subject quite common here. They discover that math is not as hard as perceived. If the game is taught in schools, it will be beneficial.
Bao has already been approved to be taught in Tanzanian schools, while active clubs can be found in countries like Italy, Germany, and Brazil. The Tanzania Bao Association says its next challenge is to see the game played at the Commonwealth Games and ultimately popularized around the world. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And we are not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Stay tuned. Here's what's coming up. And in sports, Kenya Sevens legend Humphrey Kayange to be inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame.